welcome to the Red Barrels Podcast, episode 12. We're a left-wing gaming podcast. I feel like we should say that more when we start up. We should make it clear we are a leftist gaming podcast. I've done my research. The only explicitly leftist gaming podcast that I could find, at least in the English language. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong.
Hard to believe, isn't it? It's hard to believe.
Hard to believe. But it's not just me. Who else is here? Who else is here? It's me, Alex, by the way. Not just me, Alex. But who else other than me?
Well, I already spoke, so I'll introduce myself to our listeners. Hi,
Spoilers.
listeners. It's me, Ed. I am also on allegedly the only leftist gaming podcast in the English language. And we're also joined by our dear friend,
Sophie. Hi, listeners. I'm also on the only English leftist gaming podcast in existence. So welcome in.
I mean, if we find out there is another leftist gaming podcast, we'll just put another qualifier. And we've already got like a million.
Yeah.
So we can just add one more. Hosted by three people.
Yeah.
Three people who live in the southern half of England. We can add loads of that.
Don't dox me. Oh my god.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get accosted now, thanks to you.
Oh my god.
Sorry, everyone. The stalkers are gonna come out, and they'll have some great opportunities because coming up soon, it's Games Transformed.
Don't tell them
That's right. Hey,
I didn't love that.
At least one of us will be there. You'll have to. We're not appearing officially at it, but we might be there. Well, at least one of us. I'll say that. And maybe let's reduce the details. But it will it will be a good time happening between July the 11th and 12th. Mainly the 12th. The 11th is like an academic day. The 12th is the big old festival that you've come to know and love. You've been the previous years. July 11th, 12th at Pelican House in East London, near Bethnal Green Station. It's going to be great. It's going to have Chris Pratt. It's going to have the guy from Innuendo Studios.
No way.
It's going to have Meg Giant. It's going to have Queen. It's going to have Matt Lees. It's going to have Gareth Damian Martin, who made Fits and Sleeper that we talked about the other episode. It's going to have Tom Nicholas, who spoke with us on that episode.
Whoa.
You got to be yanking my chain.
Previously mentioned history's greatest human.
Please stop.
All sorts of people.
It's going to have between 1 and 3 of the members of the Red Barrels podcast.
If you're obsessed
of
with
the
one,
surviving members of the Red Barrels
you only have a 1 in 3 chance. So maybe don't bother with the stalking, but at least one of us will be there. Because what can I say? We can't help ourselves. It's so good. It's just so good. And if you want to go, you need a ticket. And you can get a ticket from www.tickettailor.com/events/Games Transformed. Well, you can probably just search on Google for Games Transformed. You'll probably find it one way or another. But from that, we're going to move on to the main body of our podcast. And it's a special podcast. If you're looking for a normal podcast, like a plebeian, this isn't the one you were going for. Because today all three of us have played, completed, and will talk about the same game. And that game is Mouthwashing, the indie sensation of, I think, that last year, didn't it? But people love it. People are excited for it.
Yes,
it was a big
came out last year on the 26th of September.
It had a very particular TikTok hype around it as well. We're
going to talk about it. We're going to talk
about cosplay.
And this is going to be a spoiler cast. We're going to talk about the beginning and the full end and all the themes and all the things that happen, the twists and turns of the game. So while we're going to start off with a bit talking about our general themes or the general feelings about the game, we will be switching into full spoiler mode in a little while. So if you haven't played the game, that'll be your opportunity to duck out, or if you just don't care about spoilers, you can keep listening. But I will say, it's a very short game. It's maybe to kind of recap what happened for myself. I watched a playthrough video, which was almost exactly 2 hours long. So you can easily, if you want, and hey, I'd recommend it even. If you haven't played it, stop the podcast, spend 2 hours, maybe 3 if you really mess about, and play the game and then come back and listen to it. But for now, we're going to get started. So what does everyone think more generally about mouthwashing?
I guess I liked it. I did like it. I didn't like it as much as I was expecting to be honest. And I feel like I thought it was going to be a bit more up my street. I really do
Mm.
like sort of like little indie horror games that take place in one sort of limited location. I like stuff that's a bit more psychological in nature rather than like jump scare stuff. But I was hoping it would be a little weirder because I do like my horror to be a little bit weird. I was hoping it to be a little bit weird. And I think my sort of main contention is it with it, which I think we'll talk more a bit, was that I found it a little bit too edgy and a little bit too, what's the word? Cynical. I feel like it was
Mm.
quite cynical, and I don't know how much it earned its sort of cynicism, where I feel like I'm obviously okay with cynicism. I'm on the left. You kind of get used to a lot of it, but I do think that like when it comes
Occupational
to
hazard.
occupational hazard, right? But I do think that when it comes to storytelling, I do think cynicism has to be earned. And it did feel a little bit relentless for me in terms of the cynicism. So I have mixed feelings about it. I see why there's like the fan culture that there is about it. Like I understand why TikTok and cosplayers picked up on it at the extent that they did. Specifically, there was like a whole meme on TikTok that I saw that was associated with the song Imogen Heap, with a song by Imogen Heap and lots of like really cool transitions and cosplay transitions. But honestly, I feel like those represented the game a little bit more cool than I actually found it being. So I was kind of disappointed, to be honest. I thought it was fun and like not, I wouldn't say it's like a waste of money because it's a short game and it's reasonably fun and engaging. But I was a little bit disappointed, honestly. But I'm interested to hear your perspectives, Ed.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I miss the trends. I'm not a cool enough guy to have been on the TikTok and all that kind of stuff. Like I go on TikTok, but I miss the trend. Oh,
Ed,
sorry, I'm the bad boy.
you
I forgot.
are the bad boy of the Red
Hey, you don't
Barrel
have to be
It
podcast.
trendy.
You'll always be.
didn't make
You
it to my
can't
You don't
not
have to be
cool.
trendy.
Somehow I missed the Bebo bubble on this one. Um, So I didn't really have any expectations going in, other than that Alex had alleged that it was good, which means nothing to me. So I had no expectations. I liked it. If people love it, I didn't love it. I liked it. I thought it was quite good. I thought I was quite hooked right at the start. I don't know how specific we want to be. It's not really a spoiler, but I liked right at the start when it was telling you, like the game was telling you to do one thing, but it wouldn't really let you do it. I was like, "Ooh, interesting! Like,
Yes, I
what an
agree.
interesting thing this is going to do." I'm not sure that the game like completely delivered on what seemed like quite an interesting start, but I liked it. I didn't love it. I thought thematically there was a lot of stuff which was interesting and kind of up our street as like leftists. There's stuff to sort of dig your teeth into, but yeah, I mean it's not gonna be on my game of the year list or whatever. You're like when we're in December in that podcast looking back at the best games we played of the year, it's not gonna be on there. But I thought it was perfectly good. I had a good time. I agree that it was very cynical. I don't know if I think that's a problem with the game. I think there is a place for just relentlessly cynical things. I agree though that there's not necessarily as up my street as something which has got a little dash of hope in there. I would sort of prefer, but yeah, I don't know. Alex, how did you find the game? You obviously were aware of it before playing it as well, weren't you? Did this
Yeah.
match? Did it
I
match
mean,
your expectations a bit more closely?
I think you maybe slightly misrepresented me there. I don't love this game. I think it's good. I think it's mainly, to be honest, I wanted to cover it because it got a lot of buzz and it was what people were talking about, and it clearly has some level of political themes, so it seemed like it'd be appropriate for the podcast.
Mm-mm.
I suppose kind of give a bit of context. My kind of relationship with horror as a genre, which is I don't really like horror very much. Largely,
Is that games or is that everything?
pretty much everything. Largely because I don't get scared of it. I
All
don't want
right.
to put I don't want to put myself as a true hard man.
Big
No,
dog
I don't. I
Alex.
like horror, but
Everything.
I don't actually
I
find
get
it very
scared
scary. I'm
in
kind
my
of the
real
same.
life plenty of times, but I just don't get scared by media really.
Mhm.
For instance, I remember just before I think we started doing this podcast, I played the remake of Silent Hill 2. I've
Mhm.
not played the original, and it's very good. I really enjoyed it, and I wasn't scared for a single second. And I remember after I finished it, I watched like a watch through of someone playing it to like a lore master who see if it was hidden depth I missed or something, and he was just constantly shitting himself while he's playing this game, and I just found it bizarre because I didn't find anything in it scary at
Weird
Do you
all.
think
flex, but
do you think that
okay.
was? Do you think that was?
I'm joking.
Do you think that was like real from that YouTuber, or was that like
I do
No,
feel
no.
like sometimes YouTubers
overhyping?
exaggerate for sure.
Yeah. I think he
Yeah.
was. I think he
Streamers
was
as
a little bit,
well.
but I think he was genuinely quite scared by
I feel like the most scared I've ever been in a video game is when you're playing Minecraft and then you hear the creeper hiss behind you and you're like, fuck.
it.
I think there's like some genuine fear as well in like Slender Man. I feel like it does
Yes, I
actually
agree.
capture
I
a very
agree.
good, very specific fear of fearing the anticipation of fear. It's very good that way.
I,
But yeah.
I completely agree. I actually do basically agree with you as well, Alex.
Mm,
I've consumed quite a lot of, well, actually not that much, but I've consumed some horror content over the years, and
mm,
most of it feels like it's trying a bit too hard to be scary. A
Yeah.
lot of it feels like it's going, "Oh, guys, look, isn't this creepy?" Or,
mm.
"Oh no, there's like something, a bad sex thing's happening."
Yeah.
Oh, and it's like, okay, well done,
I
congratulations.
Yeah.
consume a lot of horror novels, but not because I find them
Interesting.
scary. But I consume a lot of horror novels, but like not stuff that's like serial killer but in the bathroom. Like I don't read a lot of like Stephen
Dun
King.
dun
I
dun
Yeah.
dun.
yeah, I just read a lot of like very again like weird or supernatural horror, maybe more weird than anything. Just quite surreal
Yeah,
horror, like Kentucky Route Zero type horror.
Sure.
Obviously, that's not horror, but like that kind of just
Yeah.
weirdness.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah,
yeah.
and not because I find it scary. I just find it interesting, like storytelling wise. But yeah,
Yeah.
That's
So I
interesting.
mean, let's say I don't really get scared of things, and suffice to say, I wasn't scared by
no,
mouthwashing at any
I
time.
don't think mouthwashing
Yeah,
is the
of
kind
course.
of scare
But me,
experience though. But
yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it's not. It's not, I don't think anyone's going to be losing. Even people who are really into horror are going to be losing sleep over it.
yeah,
But I just mean I have a kind of something of a disconnected connection with it. As I said, but I can enjoy these games. As I said, I really
mm,
liked Silent Hill 2, and the kind of intellectual view of this game and the themes it has and stuff are something I found quite interesting. I'll say probably my biggest disappointment with it was, and I guess maybe this is more my problem than anything else, or I suppose maybe our problem or our type of people, in that I was hoping there would be more of a kind of a political edge to it.
mm.
Um, so why don't we just quickly just
Interesting.
go over the basic concept of the.
I thought there was quite a strong political edge to it, but
Well,
let's continue, and
I'll get into it in a sec.
we'll bring out the themes.
So this is a game. It's set in the future, kind of indistinct time in the future. There's a crew of people, a small crew on a spaceship that is just a hauling freighter, hauling something across interstellar space or whatever. The science fiction elements of it are barely matter in the entire game. They probably could have literally set it just on a boat in reality, I think, theoretically, maybe. There's very little that any of that matters, but that's fine. That's not criticism. And so they're hauling something across space. And at the beginning of the first scene of the game, is the character you're playing. It's a first person game. For some reason, sets the ship to crash into an asteroid. And then the rest of the game is kind of, it goes back and forward through time from before they hit the asteroid and afterwards, and in the afterwards is dealing with the aftermath of that. They appear to have been stranded. They're there for months, living on whatever food supplies they have, hoping for rescue. They don't know when it'll come. And that's basically the situation. Now, the kind of main political angle of it is that it's, I would say, not just quite similar, it's very similar to the film Alien, where there's a kind of a faceless corporation that exists, and it's called the Pony Express, that runs this hauler, and they're bad, and they treat them badly, and they're kind of working class guys who are trying to get by in this world. And that stuff I just felt in the game was a little underbaked. I'm sure we'll get into more of the specifics later on. I think it was there. It was part of it, but I mean, it doesn't really go any deeper than it does in, say, the film
Which
Alien.
which bit specifically do you think was underbaked?
Well, just the kind of economic politics. Now, going into, I won't go further than this until we talk about spoilers, but there is a gender politics element that is very. They do some really interesting stuff with that, and just generally character stuff around the characters. That I think there's some really interesting stuff, but I just kind of, I don't know. It seemed like an obvious setup for more more of a look into the kind of economics of it. Really, it's that stuff is mainly just background that just gives the characters reasons to do the things they do, or just like be in a bad situation. I mean, I think it's there, and I think it's fine, but I kind of hoped it would go deeper. And but from the buzz, I kind of thought it might. and it didn't really, I thought. So I was a bit disappointed by that. Overall, though, I mean, it is very limited. You're basically in like 3 rooms in the entire game, 4 maybe, and like some corridors between them. That's the entire game. You never go see outside the ship at any point. There are points where things get a bit surreal and get strange within that context, but it's obviously a game that's been quite carefully managed for a small budget, and that's good. But as I said, it's only 2, 3 hours long. But I did think, yeah, I thought the characters were pretty well written. And I have to say, you mentioned the TikTok buzz. That's kind of the most kind of remarkable thing about this game because
Mm.
I don't really understand why there is so much buzz and like fan art of the characters. There's if you go on TikTok and on the internet generally, you can find all sorts of fan stuff of like, oh, what if the characters are just having fun in like better times? I guess just like removed from the actual drama of what happened, just like oh, just goofing around stuff.
Mm.
And I just find it just like these like 4 kind of youngish to middle-aged people in jumpsuits who hate their jobs and never really have any real good time over the entire game to have just generated this level of kind of passion for them. I find it somewhat bizarre. I can imagine it for, I don't know, a game with like cool anime characters, but for this, it just feels bizarre. And I kind of think that's kind of part of why people are making this stuff because it's a bit incongruous that you would make fan art and do cosplay and fan cam videos for a game like this. I should say for our listeners, if you've not played it, it has a very kind of a lo-fi look to it. It's quite low poly. It's purposefully low resolution. Some people call this PS1, PlayStation 1 style. I have disputes over the exact specifications of the PlayStation 1 hardware, and it's idiosyncrasy, so that always annoys me. But it's very much that kind of style. Well, I guess I summed
Um,
it all up.
yeah, pretty much.
Next
I mean,
section.
my main
Mm.
one of my things that I was thinking when I was playing it was, does this need to be a game? I want to get
Mm.
your guy. I've got some thoughts on it, but did you guys think about that at all? What do you make of that?
I did. Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know if it did need to be a game. I think we actually had that discussion because I played it on stream. And I remember that bit where you talked about, it's been a while now, but I remember that bit where you talked about at the very beginning, where obviously it gives you this task and then you can't
Mm.
do it. And then being really intrigued by that and being like, oh, and then they kind of just didn't really do much of it. And the rest of it felt more like a graphic novel where and that's kind of how the fandom feels as well. It feels like the same fandom around like an anime or a graphic novel where they've just sort of really attached themselves to these characters and then like hypotheticals of these characters outside of this situation really seem to activate people's imagination on that front. Because I think the characters were fairly well written. I don't think they were well written enough for me to really imagine them in situations outside of the scenario that they were in.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I personally when I was playing it, I didn't feel like it had to be a game. I felt like it just didn't really in the beginning. I felt like it was a much more promising experience in the beginning, and then I was quite just more and more disappointed as I went, and it felt a bit more graphic novel-y.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I guess my instinct was similar. Playing it, just the main way that you're interacting with the game as you're playing it is you're walking about and
Mm,
occasionally clicking on a person, and then you'll have a conversation with the person. So
mm,
for people who haven't played it, that's why you would even ask that question. It's not exactly timed button inputs, with a few exceptions.
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a bit
Y-
where you're making a cake, is it? I forget. Making something in the kitchen. That's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
bit more interaction. And there's a bit later on in the game where you're being kind of chased, which I failed on that quite a few times somehow. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
did you guys? That's good.
I was just gonna add that, like, I think the only reason I could see for it to be a game was kind of this horror, which I kind of see what they were going for. I'm not sure how effective it was, but the horror aspect of playing someone who has done bad things. And I don't think that's a spoiler, but like the horror of playing someone who has done things that you would ideally never think to do and are also kind of getting away with it and being excused by the sort of other men on the ship. And it's I think that's the main purpose of the horror, but And I think that's a really interesting concept of like having you play someone who it's physically uncomfortable for you to play them because they're doing things that you wouldn't do. But I don't know how effectively it pulls it off. Like, I think I was just kind of like, and I kind of saw it coming from a mile away as well.
Yeah.
So I didn't really feel like I did feel discomfort in sort of having to make the choices that I knew I was going to make. But yeah, I don't know how effective it was.
To sort of simulate making the choices as well, right? Because you're not actually making any choices, you're
No,
just
you're
playing
not.
out someone else's choices. Sorry, Alex, I interrupted.
I was just going to say that I think we're kind of running into spoilers, and it's difficult. This is
Okay, yeah,
this is something. Part of the reason why I initially suggested this to my comrades here as a spoiler cast is that I thought there was something that we should, because it's getting some buzz. We should talk about it. But part of the problem is that most of the things that are interesting about this game are spoilers because it's so short. There's not really that much to talk about generally. So I think we should probably kind of take the band-aid off and
Yeah.
get into the spoilers.
Yeah,
So
Content warning as
if
well.
a somewhat
Trigger warning.
surreally, occasionally horror
Mm.
game with relatively minimal input sounds up your street, you've heard how we feel about it. Please go check it out if that's of interest. And if not, stay tuned to the Red Barrows podcast, where we'll be giving you our incredible insight into the rest of the game.
And I will say, as always, we're going to have the news after this section. So I will put a time code in the episode description, which you can skip to if you wanted to just skip over the spoiler sections. But for all the real heads, the deviants, the perverts who don't care about the spoilers or have just played this game, we're into it now. Spoiler time. Boo!
Ah,
Yes. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Sophie. I do think, talking about the interactivity of the game, there are a few more bits. I mean, it is borderline a visual novel. There are a few kind of point and click adventure style puzzles. Those are also quite bad. They aren't great. There are also a couple of bits that are basically stealth sequences when we get into the horror stuff. And I mean, again, partly I can't really judge it, but I found them more frustrating and a bit annoying than
Mm-hmm.
scary. So I don't really rate those sections much myself, though they are kind of conceptually sort of interesting. But yeah, I do think that the main point of it being an interactive experience is to put you in the shoes or in the eye gaze first person game. I don't know
Perspective.
how to put that.
There's a word for that.
Perspective, yeah. Got me, you got me.
Eye gaze.
In the perspective of someone who at the beginning of the game you think appears to be a decent guy if a bit brusque, and as
turns
the
out
game
he's
goes
a
on,
little piece of shit.
you find
Little
out
piece
more
of shit.
that he sexually assaulted Anya, one of the other crew members, that she got pregnant, and that he crashed the ship to basically avoid the responsibility of dealing with this in any way. And so it's pretty unambiguously a genuinely terrible person.
I would say
Uh,
I would say that saying he crashed the ship to do that does simplify it quite a bit, though.
Sure.
I feel like it precipitates somewhat of a mental breakdown,
Mm.
which leads to him crashing the ship, and that's part of it. Rather than it, I don't think it was like a logical decision that he made. Like he looked at his accounting and weighed it up on the abacus and decided it'd be better for him to crash the ship.
I disagree. I actually, as I said, I just watched that bit the other night, and he has a conversation with Curly, and I mean that's another part of kind of interesting part of the story is that Curly, who you at the beginning think is a terrible guy who crashed the ship, and then you eventually find out, oh, he didn't do that. But in that final conversation he has with Jimmy, he basically lets him crash the ship because he also can't deal with the responsibilities of dealing with what the aftermath of what Jimmy has done.
Mm.
So I mean, I think it's not a terribly unique take that Curly is also pretty bad, but but an enabler. So it seems pretty clear that he is specifically crashing the ship. I mean, he's obviously not in a great place mentally in general,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I feel like a lot of the game is an exploration of him not being in his right mind
Yeah.
and looking at kind of the reasons, or not the reasons exactly, but like, yeah, the causes of that and sort of the culture that created Jimmy. That's
Mhm.
kind of what the game is about. So I think
Yeah.
it's that how I interpreted it I guess maybe it's up for interpretation exactly how in control of himself you think Jimmy is at that moment.
Sure.
But
I mean,
sorry, yes.
certainly there's no doubt that at minimum after that, he descends into basically delusion.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. So now that we're past the spoiler threshold, Sophie, what do you think of the spoilery aspect?
You mean like the end of the game? Like, what do
Well,
I
the
think
end
of?
and the various revelations we just.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do think that Curly is as bad. I don't think he's any better. I do think he is as bad. And I think the best character in the game, I guess, either is the Japanese guy whose name I forget, and then the
Daisuke?
Daisuke,
Daisuke.
yeah. Daisuke, and then also the I guess the old man that you meet in the very beginning. He's sort of,
Yeah.
you think he's going to be awful and he's like really difficult to deal with, but then he ends up actually being the only person who sticks up for Anya.
Yeah.
What, Swansea?
So yeah, I do see Curly as bad. Like, I'm like, there are so many opportunities you could have had to hold this person responsible and you didn't, just because it was uncomfortable. So I think Curly sucks. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird because I have kind of mixed feelings about sexual assault being used as a plot device. I do have mixed feelings about it. I obviously appreciate that like stories need to be told. I'm not sure how I felt about it in this. It feels a bit, I don't know, it feels a little bit like, I don't know. I remember like when the Tomb Raider, the Tomb Raider remastered games came out, and there was a lot of hubbub about the fact, and I did agree with it, that like several characters basically threatened to sexually assault Lara Croft after capturing her. And I remember that conversation being like, there are, it's always this narrative storytelling of like the worst thing that can happen to a woman is sexual assault. And I do kind of feel, which like I don't think is true. Obviously, it is terrible. I just don't think it's true that that's the worst narrative thing that can happen. And I think it's a very sort of easy, dark place to go to when it comes to telling stories about women. So I have kind of mixed feelings about sexual assault being used as a plot device in that way. But obviously I think it does contribute to that sense of horror of occupying the position of a character who has done something like that. So yeah, I see the point. I think I'm just like, I don't know, I'm always very skeptical, and I think maybe that's why I sort of feel like the cynicism was really unearned, where it's just like this really dark story, everyone sucks. This awful thing happened to this woman, and that's kind of the only reason she was there, was to have an awful thing happen to her. She didn't really experience or do anything else, and that I don't really enjoy. And from that perspective, I think the cynicism kind of got to me, where I'm like, I don't even necessarily need like a glimmer of hope, but I would have preferred maybe an opportunity for Anya to be something more than just what happened to her sexually. And I
Yeah.
feel like she didn't really have that opportunity as a character, and I found that quite disappointing. And like I said, just a little bit too cynical. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you. I think this tells a kind of a story that's kind of interesting and good and worthwhile at the heart of it. But I do think it doesn't center Anya and her experiences in it enough.
Mm,
She's mainly there as a plot device to have one, had
mm.
this horrible thing happen to her, and two, be like
Why the
basically
sheep crashed.
the main engine of like the mystery.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, you think she probably is incompetent because Jimmy keeps having a go at her, and then you realize that this has happened to her. She hasn't got much external life beyond that.
Mm,
So I think, and almost everything that is debated about what happened happens between Jimmy, Curly, and the old guy who's called Swansea.
mm-hmm,
Three men basically arguing
mm-hmm.
over this thing that happened to this woman. I think in that regard, I think it's like a good story. If I could go back in time and tell them the changes they should make, I think they should make some big changes around there. But I think the core of the story would still be quite good. But yeah, I do think that is quite a big problem with the game.
I also agree. I thought that's very boring that we all kind of agree on it. I mean,
No, you can be
I
the really sexist one, Ed. You're the bad boy of the Red Barrels podcast.
I guess maybe this sounds bad, but yeah, I didn't find that part of the story particularly compelling,
Yeah.
frankly. Like, I
Yeah.
just didn't think it was handled in a way where it was that interesting. As
Mm,
I kind of, yeah, basically agree with, it felt like it was trying to be shocking And it was like, it's not like I'm bothered that it tried to be shocking. Like, I don't think, how dare they, or something. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be moralistic about it. I'm not saying it's wrong of them for trying to do it, but I just don't think it was really handled in a very interesting way. As you
Yeah.
say, Anya's like really not that developed as a character. If you were going to try and do that story, it would have been much more effective if you'd had Anya be a real character rather than
Mm.
a site of a crime, essentially.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I've got my notes that I prepared about this, and when I came to think about that theme, like, I've not really got anything to say about it. Like, it just wasn't done in a very compelling way, and I don't think the game was really interested in that very much,
Yeah.
personally. And yet the game sort of hangs on that as a reveal later on in the game. So I
Yeah.
do think that's definitely a weakness about the game.
Yeah, I feel like you oh, sorry, you mentioned the gender politics right at the beginning, and it's like, I feel like it could have had very interesting gender politics, but, like, I do think that, like, yeah, I don't know, I do feel like that there should have been a little bit more challenge, not necessarily from Curly. I think it's really good. I think my favorite part of the story, I think, is how Curly just kind of enables the behavior of his friend because it's awkward and he cares about his friend and he thinks it's this awful thing that happened, but ooh, it's really just more awkward to deal with because I think that's very realistic of like
Yeah.
how men might sort of excuse the behavior of other men, in the name of comfort, right? But I just kind of wish there had been more pushback or consequences in some other form. Obviously you'll say like, but they all died in the end. But yeah, Anya did too, and so did the old man, whose name I keep forgetting. And
Swansea.
it's
Swansea.
yeah, Bunty. And I kind of wish that he had had a bit more opportunity to really sort of square up against Curly and Jimmy and be like and be the man who calls out other men in this situation. I thought it was going to be more of a story about like, how sort of patriarchy allows men to protect each other even by sort of not being explicit or not saying anything, you know?
Mm.
I thought it was going to be a bit more about that, and then it ended up kind of falling flat on that front and just sort of punishing everyone and just being kind of just tragic all around, which I wasn't particularly interested in. And I do think that when you use something like a sexual assault for shock factor, again, I do think we have to earn it, and I just don't think it earned it. It
Yeah.
didn't feel earned.
So, Sophie, had you heard about anything about the kind of gender politics stuff in this game before you played it?
No, no.
Mm.
I knew there was a sexual assault that took place, and like I
Oh,
saw, obviously it was just one female crew member, and
yeah.
then three other male crew members, three, four, and I was like, oh, okay, I can,
Cool.
I can see what's gonna happen here. But I did know about the sexual assault. Yeah.
Well, I didn't know anything about that at all. Literally, like all I knew about it was some schmoes hauling stuff across space. And I should say for our listeners, anyone who listened, the reason it's called mouthwashing is because it turns out that what they are hauling is just like thousands, millions of liters of mouthwash. That's it. Because they go into the cabin to find out, see if there's
Mm.
something that can help them, and it's just mouthwash. So they all get drunk on the alcohol in the mouth. But I didn't know anything about the sex, and so I think it probably worked better for me because it kind of came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting that to be a theme of it at all. So when it kind of creeps in, you're like, oh shit, and also when you realize that, or when I realized that, oh, it's quote unquote me who did that. This guy I was playing, I thought Jimmy was again a bit brusque, but yeah, the others are kind of being a bit incompetent. So I thought I was basically on his side at the start of the game. And so when I realized that, like, oh, this is another element of the game, and that it's really about a guy not being able to handle the responsibility. One being broke enough to do it in the first place, and two not being able to handle the responsibility of having done this, and then how another man, Curly, like, it also can't handle the responsibility of it. I mean, it keeps bringing up that screen that says "Take responsibility," and that's obviously what the kind of main theme of the game is about taking responsibility for your action and what that means and whether you can do it. And obviously, he just avoids taking responsibility the entire game, despite how much he says.
Yeah, I would disagree with the idea that he can't take responsibility. I think he doesn't. I think
Well,
is
yeah,
the sort of the main communication of
he
the
can't.
game
He
there.
can't because he's a terrible person. He's not.
Well, I mean that's what I mean.
He has the
He doesn't.
opportunity to take
He doesn't,
responsibility.
though. I think there is a key difference there between, can't and doesn't. Like, I think he chooses not to, and he also, there's nobody around him, including the company itself, which I do think is where some of the company and economic, commentary comes in, is that it's the company has created this work environment
Yeah.
where they, one member of the team has ultimate power over everyone else. and they can essentially do what they want unpunished. So there is no real responsibility because there's one member of the team who can basically do whatever they want and lead completely unchallenged, and there's nothing anyone else can do about that. So I think he doesn't take responsibility. It's an active choice, and also he doesn't have to. The environment that he exists in, and I think this can be a larger metaphor for patriarchy as a whole, but also, capitalism in general, is that he chooses not to take responsibility, and also he doesn't have to. There is no reason that he should take responsibility because nobody around him holds him accountable. The company doesn't hold him accountable. And the men in his life also don't hold him accountable. So I do think that responsibility is obviously an important theme, but I think it's rather than he can't handle the responsibility of leading, I think he leads badly because he doesn't have to lead well. And it's also a poor structure to have on a ship with so few crew members.
Yeah.
Can I? So my take on the responsibility aspect is I think Jimmy sort of fetishizes taking responsibility.
Yeah.
He's been inculcated by all the corporate propaganda we see throughout the game into this highly individualistic view of the world where you're like an Ayn Randian sort of person who has to take responsibility, and he wants to pull himself up the career ladder we see at various points.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like a narcissist. He's obsessed with the idea of him being an individual who takes responsibility and utterly fails to do so at the one thing that really the most important thing that he should have been taking responsibility for in the whole game. For me, it was that tension that I thought was actually one of the most interesting parts about the game, and I did think that went well. I did think that was an effective thing I was quite engaged with as opposed to the gender politics aspect of it. I thought the tension between that aesthetic, the corporate propaganda aesthetic that he'd internalized, and how he actually acted was the heart of the game for me in terms of what was engaging about it. I would also say, I guess my experience at the start was a little different from yours, I think, Alex, in that when Jimmy was being sort of implying that Anya was incompetent, I thought that was the game telling me that this guy's toxic.
Yeah,
right from the get-go.
What does it say about me?
I immediately hated Jimmy. I immediately
I was like, oh, okay, he's a dick then.
Don't talk
Well,
about
I guess I
yeah.
just assumed because it was, I was playing the character, he was probably an okay guy. And he probably, we only see small vignettes of their lives. And he
I think that would help.
He would have
if
real
you
reason.
had that experience.
Yeah, maybe.
Because my experience straight away, because this happens immediately, was, oh, I see, we're going to be playing a dick.
Playing a dickhead,
and that's going to be the game. And then that was the game. So it was yeah, that makes sense. And then the game is just, look at this way in which he's a dick. Look at this way in which he's a dick. Oh, and there's this thing. It's I get it. The guy's a dick. I'm not a fan of him. But I mean, yeah, that was the sort of stuff that didn't work so well for me. But the stuff that did work better was the exploration of the world in which he exists that makes him be a dick. The sort of almost neoliberal, internalized, highly individualistic thing. Obviously, I love seeing critiques of that, and it kind of is a critique of that.
Well, I mean, as I said at the beginning, I wasn't that impressed, but I was a bit disappointed by the kind of economic politics angle of it. And Ed, you said you were quite up on it, so I guess we should maybe get into that a bit.
Well, that's kind of the stuff that I'm talking about.
Yeah,
here,
yeah. Well,
really.
the issue I had with it, I guess, was just that I feel like I've seen most of that stuff before. I feel like it doesn't really, again, this is obviously a game that is influenced by the movie Alien, even though there's not basically the first, I don't know, half hour maybe of Alien before the alien turns up. It's working class guys on a spaceship who is run by a company that doesn't care about them. And of course, in that movie, spoilers for Alien, I guess, it turns out that the company knew all about the alien. They were sent there specifically to find it, and the crew was considered completely expendable in getting this alien. And that's kind of similar here. The company doesn't care about them. They just want the mouth. It's even more, at least securing a deadly alien might be a goal of important. Whereas in this, you're literally just moving, millions of liters of mouthwash, and that's it. But beyond that, they are treated badly. It's kind of got a similar kind of 80s grungy sci-fi aesthetic. And I just felt like it didn't really go any further than that. And I kind of hoped it would, I guess. But I don't know, the stuff you were saying is kind of making me reevaluate. Maybe there is a bit more to it than I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real focus is on the corporate propaganda aspect of it. I mean, we see that to the extent that there's an antagonist other than Jimmy, it's the mascot who sort of in Jimmy's imagination comes to life in various ways. At certain points, it like chases him around and stuff like that. He's literally tormented by this corporate propaganda. That's what's like warped him, I would say.
Mm.
So I would say that's a relatively explicit thing, saying that it's kind of the society that he is in that's led him to have these like awful things, and that's obviously a reflection of the kind of companies and corporate propaganda that we see in real life. And I would say there are also other very specific detail inclusions that make it seem like this is meant to be about the corporation at least as much as it's about Jimmy. There's all kinds of failings that you can see in the game. We discover that there's only 4 cryopods, for example, and there's 5
Mm.
members of the crew. They say that there's no locks on the sleeping area, even though the sleeping area is occupied by men and women. Obviously, there's Jimmy's failed psych evaluation, which is just sort of overlooked consistently. Yeah, as you say, the company clearly doesn't give a fuck, and the game tells you that in lots
Mm.
of different ways, in a way which makes me feel comfortable saying like it's very clearly a pointed critique of like the difference between, in the same way that we see Jimmy has a difference between like internalized individual responsibility versus how he actually acts, we see there's a difference between the corporate propaganda and them not taking responsibility for their employees or for
Mm.
the ship that they put together. So I thought that kind of rhymed and sort of mirrored each other in a way which made like, if Jimmy's a piece of shit, then the corporation's kind of a piece of shit. Like they're meant to, he's almost like a metaphor for the corporation
He's
in
like a
in a certain sense.
synecdoche.
Oh,
Ooh, wow! We're
I
getting
don't know that
specific.
word.
I'm pretty sure.
Very good.
I'm gonna
Not
double
seen
check, but
the film with Philip Seymour Hoffman, Synecdoche, New York?
I haven't. But yeah, so yeah,
I've not seen
synecdoche
it.
so referring to, yeah, as in a term for a part of something to refer to the whole. So yes, I do
Okay,
agree
great.
that like basically Jimmy is a synecdoche for the corporate sort of lack of accountability. And
Mhm.
again, there's not any reason to be accountable, because obviously the company's just going to keep on going, making money unpunished. And kind of the same with Jimmy is that he can also probably, if he were to have, kept himself together, then he could have just kept rising up and rising up and rising up the ranks of Pony Express. Obviously, we don't know if this is the first time he's done something like this. It's potentially he's done something like this before. We don't know if this is a pattern of behavior with Jimmy.
I feel like this is just maybe a speculation. I feel like the game kind of implies that it's a pattern of behavior,
Yeah,
because
I
I
think
feel
so
like we're
too.
seeing this really like keen guy like
Yeah,
wants to rise up the corporate ladder, and he's still at the bottom. To me, that implies that like
there's
that
reasons
he's
he's being
probably been
kept there.
moved apartments because people don't
Yeah,
want this like creep in their team or
yeah,
whatever, and yet he still gets a new position.
yeah.
Like they don't get
Exactly,
rid
like,
of
he's
him;
not
they just don't let
actually
him.
exactly, right? Like, it's the
Yeah,
classic thing of just like, "Oh, well, he has so much, right? We're not gonna charge him on sexual assault because he has so much potential." And it's like, "Okay,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, basically what happens is even if he is even mildly held responsible, he can still go down that track. He might be slightly delayed, but he's still going to be able to do it because he's not actually held accountable." So yeah, very much a synecdoche representing the sort of
Synecdoche.
grander corporate structure.
I will say that I think I kind of disagree with you about the mascot. So, for our listeners, if you are, again, a pervert who listens to the spoiler bits without having actually played the game,
I feel
as
like in
the
the
game,
context of this game, we should be careful
yes,
with
that's true,
throwing that
actually.
word
Good point.
around.
That's a good point. As you play the game, it gets more and more surreal. It becomes harder to know what bits are real and what bits aren't. And part of that is that he starts having these presumably visions, presumably these are the not real bits, of in various forms of the mascot of the company, who is a weird pony thing whose name I forget.
Polly?
The o- Paulie,
Polle, I believe.
I think the game is Swedish, and I get a feeling it's a Swedish name. Some a resonance to them, and it's the only voice you hear in the game. The game is entirely text, apart from the broken microphone or the speaker voice of this mascot. And so you see this in various kind of increasingly weird and mutilated forms over the game. But I believe that the mascot represents the concept of responsibility. Frequently, the mascot is presented as even more specifically the baby that Anya is pregnant with, which is basically the ticking time bomb for Jimmy. Right, once Anya has that baby, what he's done is going to be undeniable to everyone, and he's finally going to be in some sort of trouble. So that's kind of what's kind of gnawing at him, is directly kind of driving him further into derangement. Is this impending doom of responsibility coming to get him? I mean, there's a whole bit where you do essentially an ultrasound on a weird fleshy mound that then eventually births literally births the mascot coming out, and it chases you. So I don't think but I think the whole point is that it's kind of all wrapped up in this, and that's what I mean by the corporation essentially just largely just acts as a cause for the other things that happen. It's the if they were in the army, it would be the army forcing the pressure of the responsibility on. Not that the game isn't. I would say it's maybe not in a terribly sophisticated way, but it's an anti-capitalist game. There are some bits where you can watch this kind of surreal television that have these presumably public domain clips of how capitalism works and stuff. So it is in there. I'm not saying that, but I just think it feels like it just kind of slots in for the story they really want to tell, which is the kind of sexual assault and the responsibility angle.
I
Yeah,
think
I don't know.
I think honestly, I think it honestly, even if that might be, I feel like maybe it's both.
I mean, it could be. Yeah. I mean,
I think it's
I
for
think
me
I
it
think
would
it
be
works with
both.
both. I
Yeah.
think it's definitely both, but I just mean that's why I kind of was
I definitely
disappointed that there wasn't
prefer the
more depth
corporate
to the
metaphor as
the
opposed to the
anti-capitalist thing.
Yeah.
I actually prefer the
Yeah.
corporate metaphor as opposed to the baby metaphor. I don't know, because then again, it just kind of feels like, well, now like the baby's responsible for the ticking time bomb. Like it's Jimmy that's the ticking
I
time
mean,
bomb.
Jimmy's
Like I don't
yeah, but
think.
that's just like
Yeah.
that's just in Jimmy's mind. Jimmy's a bad person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think I still think the pony represents like the duality of it, of the corporate propaganda
Mm,
about taking responsibility and also the
Yeah.
inability to actually take responsibility. So yeah, I mean,
I think
you
this is
you said
both.
you think it probably is both. Sophie,
Yeah.
you've also said you think it's probably both. I think it probably is both to some extent,
Mm.
but I think I view it as slightly more pointed towards the corporation than perhaps you viewed it as, Alex. Which would yeah, I think if I read the game as you appear to have read the game, Alex, I would also like the game less. So that I guess that makes sense. I think the other thing that I liked about the game was in the name of the game itself, the mouth washing aspect of it. I think the game sort of talks about is partially about a kind of hollowness, a kind of meaninglessness. All this happens because these characters are transporting mouthwash,
Yeah.
and I guess more widely it happens in the context of the corporation and the economic system it exists within. So there's this sort of the meaninglessness which is there throughout, yeah, which does come across as the sort of cynicism that you talked about earlier, Sophie. And
Mm.
then also the mouthwash represents meaninglessness as well, in that because it can be drunk and get you drunk, it represents like an escape to an oblivion, a sort of empty state, which is what the strategy that Swansea takes when they get in their horrible situations. He just becomes drunk basically all of the time. And he talks about how the best days of his life was when he was an alcoholic, and his like the simplicity of alcoholism,
Mm.
where the only problem is the empty bottle. And I thought, like, combined with the previous themes that we were talking about, I think it's a commentary on the meaninglessness of that kind of the kind of corporation that they're operating within, and of the corporate propaganda. And there's a kind of a tragedy that brings like a tragedy to the characters as well, of like their lives are so empty as a result of this which they exist within. And I thought adding that element into the mix, I thought was juicy.
Mm.
I enjoyed that aspect of it. So between the corporate propaganda parts and the clear meaninglessness of all of their work and their lives, it gave a lovely little tragic flavor to it, which I enjoyed. And that taking all of that together, that's what I liked about the game, and that's why I overall enjoyed the game and thought it was good, even though we do
Yeah.
have critiques of it.
I think
Yeah,
I don't know.
I never
What do
really
you guys
considered
think?
that. Yeah.
yeah, I think the mouthwashing sort of metaphor was my favorite. I think part of it as well, where it's like where you realize all they're holding is mouthwash.
Mhm.
We did have a the most controversial conversation we had in chat was whether or not people should be using mouthwash. My dentist says no.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Yeah, my
Mine
dentist
says
says
no as
no.
well.
My dentist says throw it out, actually, even. So
Mm.
he's like, even if you do use it, don't finish the bottle. He's like, just throw it out. But
Wow.
seems to be one of the most controversial opinions.
I don't think I've ever
But
discussed mouthwash with my dentist ever. So.
yeah, he's always just like, do you floss? And then do you use mouthwash? And if you say no, then he's like, good, throw it out.
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
I've had much the same conversation.
Well,
Yeah.
you know
like,
that like historically, mouthwash, basically the concept of like halitosis was
was
invented
made up. Yeah.
because like it was originally used, yeah, for like disinfectant or something.
Yeah.
And they just wanted to find a new way to sell it, and they were
Yeah.
just like, well,
Yeah.
maybe you can do this.
Which even then, obviously, is a great product as a metaphor for the sort of
Yeah.
meaninglessness of capitalism or meaninglessness of the system. Is that like
Mm.
That's
obviously
such a good point.
mouthwash is a meaningless product. It is
Mm.
completely made up. There's no reason it should exist. The only reason it exists is to make money. There is no reason that it exists. Like, it doesn't, it's like slightly better than brushing your teeth if you haven't brushed your teeth, but like, you know, brushing your teeth is much better, and you don't need to do mouthwash in addition to brushing your teeth because it's far better. It's far superior. It'll like even wash the enamel, wash the basically the toothpaste off your teeth anyway, which is the thing that actually does the work. So
And
yeah.
it makes you feel like you've done something.
And it makes you
It
feel
makes
like
you
you've done
feel like
something.
you're
Oh.
taking responsibility for your teeth,
Yeah,
but you've
but you're
failed
not
to on
actually.
every
You have
meaningful
to
level.
actually
I
just
didn't
floss.
see the
Yeah.
depth. I
You
didn't
actually
see
have
the
There
to
are
just
depths.
floss, and flossing is the hardest part, but you kind of just have to do it. That is the
Yeah.
best way to take care of your teeth. So maybe there's a dental metaphor in here as well, you know?
Yeah,
So
brought to you by the British Dental Association.
Colgate. So yeah, I think that is my favorite. Now I like it slightly more because I hadn't made that connection up until now, where it is just this completely useless product. Like, not only is it just a useless product in terms of like the you know, the trauma that they've had to undergo in order to haul this
Yeah.
product. Like, no product is really worth the trauma that they've
Yeah.
been through in order to do it.
But
Not
at
only
least if it were
that,
toothpaste,
at least
someone's
if
teeth
it
would
were
be clean
toothpaste,
afterwards.
someone's teeth would be clean and would be preventing brain disease, you know, down the line. But mouthwash does literally nothing, you know?
I've got to
Literally
say that
invented.
I've got to say that when as I said, I played the game a while ago, and then I watched this video just to refresh myself, and I just came to the conclusion that like Swansea was just 100% right. He was completely right to just lapse into alcoholism and drink, because I was just like, knowing what I know about the rest
Fair.
of the story, I was just like, yeah, it just seems like that's the best response to that situation. Get
I couldn't
wasted
even
on
blame
alcohol.
him, really. Yeah, because I
Yeah,
couldn't even blame him. I was like, I guess the thing is like the best thing anyone can do in this situation, seeing as nobody's taking responsibility for anything, is to only hurt themselves. Where like
yeah.
everyone else
Mm.
does that in addition to hurting other people. Yeah.
I'd say this is one thing I forgot to say earlier. Well, I didn't forget to say it. I didn't say it because it was the spoiler, but it was in the pre-spoiler era. If
All
you
right.
remember those lofty days. I do think the question of does this need to be a game? I did think the bits where you had to slice was this
Oh,
did
that was
elicit
awful.
a slight visceral response from
That
me,
was
which made me
awful.
think that along with the initial bit where it told you to do
Yeah.
something you couldn't do it. Those were the two moments where I was like, you
I
know what,
agree.
maybe this was enhanced by being a game versus a visual novel.
I agree. And
I
when
don't
you had
know.
to slice into the birthday cake, but it was the guy, I was like, oh,
Yeah,
this is I was like, I
horrible.
was literally just like, don't make me do this. Like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
come
The
on.
first time you do that and it's just into the normal birthday cake, I was just like, okay, so I'm
Uh-oh.
gonna be cutting up some people later. So obvious how it's gonna happen. So there's no
That's
way
what
they're
you think
introducing
whenever you
this
slice a
new
cake, though, Alex, to
slicing
be fair.
mechanic for no reason. Obviously, that's gonna
I
happen.
was on,
So
yeah, I
it,
was on,
that kind
yeah.
of cut out the visceral feeling when it finally arrived. I was like,
I
oh, I was
also,
vindicated.
yeah, I also
Mm.
viscerally hated the scene where you have to force feed him the
His own
thing
leg.
or whatever, and he keeps throwing it up. Was
Yeah.
because it took me
Yeah,
ages
yeah.
to figure that puzzle out as well. Because I was on
Yeah.
stream and I'm dumb when I'm on stream, so I
No,
just
no,
kept,
that's a really bad puzzle. That's like
yeah,
probably the worst part of the entire game.
I just
Is
kept
that like I
provoking
think
him
I
to
had to
throw
look it
up.
up.
And it was awful.
Like
It
exactly
was-
how you're supposed to
yeah,
arrange things is completely unclear.
yeah.
And
So I would say
and
like, yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I didn't find that bit too bad. It was the bit when you were running away from the pony that took me ages for some reason. I didn't
That also
really.
took me
I
a
was
while
like,
because I couldn't find
why?
the route.
Why is he keep? Yeah, exactly.
felt like
is that the
the
one where
route
you're in the
wasn't very well
in the warehouse
communicated.
full of all the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I love that
Yeah.
horror, but I also like the idea of monsters you can't see or monsters you
Mhm.
can't fully like conceptualize. So I really liked that idea, but the chase sequence just took all the tension out of it because I was like, I kind of just got lost. And it
Yeah,
became
yeah.
quite frustrating as a game because like I do think that I have a lot of opinions about horror games, and one of them is that a horror game should never force you to go backwards because it takes
Mhm.
all the tension out of it. It should never force you to retrace your steps because that's just frustrating and it takes the tension out of the chase. And so I did find that really irritating that I just kind of got lost. It wasn't very good at like guiding you to where you're supposed to go. Maybe I'm just dumb, but I thought it was.
Well, no,
It
I
took
don't
me
think you
quite a
are.
while to find the
No,
correct
no.
route.
I don't think
It
you
was
are. But
frustrating.
the trick is that you don't run.
Yeah, no, I knew that. Yeah. It
It took me ages to work that out. even
Yeah.
though there's a
No,
note
I think
at
it
the
took me a
beginning
while to
that
work
tells
that out as well. I think it took it about halfway. They were like, "Can you walk?" I was like, "Oh, no, yeah, you can."
I'd say that my last point on this game is not one that I thought of while playing it, but it was one that I saw in Stephanie Sterling's video about mouthwashing. Is all about how she sees the game as being about disability,
Hmm.
talking about how the most visual horror in the game comes from Curly's disabled body and how Curly never gets to make decisions for himself for the
Mm.
most part of the game.
Oh, I see.
That Curly's treated as an object about whom decisions are made. He's sort of feared by the rest of the crew when they're sort of working out what they're going to do with him, treated as an object and sort of resented. And it's sort of like the sort of fear that of being an imposition on someone is what Curly's
Mm.
is like partially what Curly's about. And that's not something that I thought of while playing the game. But I wondered if you guys had thought of that, or if you guys
I mean,
if that had occurred to you guys.
his kind of look is probably the most kind of iconic kind of horror element, and it is quite, arresting for the
Mhm.
for again the people who defy convention. And this spoilers. He's all wrapped up in bloody bandages and has just one staring kind of wild eye out of it, and he has to have his mouth opened and closed to put painkillers down it, and it's
And they put painkillers in, it seems to like shut him up more than to
yeah.
actually do
Mm.
anything for him. I guess that's an element of him being treated as an object and as more of a nuisance than as
Mm.
someone, than as a subject that should be cared for. There was definitely no sense of that they were caring for Curly. Maybe Anya was, but Jimmy certainly wasn't.
No.
Yeah, I feel
So I
like
do think there is.
there's
Please, Sophie.
definitely the sense that like Anya finds it difficult to give him the medication because I think she's the only one who's sort of really humanizing him in this moment of like, oh, it's difficult to see him suffer. I don't like force feeding him the medication because he clearly doesn't enjoy the process of being force fed. And that's when your sort of narrator character treats her as incompetent. And I'm like, no, I get it. I mean, that is like an awful thing to have to do to someone. And it does kind of, as you say, kind of feel like it's not really caring. And every time I did have to force feed him drugs, I was like, I don't think this is done in a caring way. I don't think I necessarily picked up on that metaphor, but that absolutely makes sense. Like I think
Mhm.
that's very I think that's very accurate. I think that sort of experience. And I think even just treating the sort of caring for him as a burden, treating him as a burden, and how he probably feels like a burden. And yeah, you're so right about also just shutting him up with the pain meds instead of actually caring if it's actually getting rid of the pain, right? Because they only really give him the pain meds when he starts screaming and making everyone's life really unpleasant. That bit in general is just very unpleasant. The force feeding as well is just very unpleasant. There's a lot of force feeding,
Yeah.
very unpleasant. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think a lot
Maybe it
of the
represents how they're being force fed corporate propaganda.
force fed
I don't know.
propaganda.
That's it. That's it. We
Maybe.
cracked it. We
There
cracked
you
it.
go. I think overall, like I've come away kind of a bit more sort of fond of it in terms of the sort of analysis of it. I do still think it's a little bit like too relentlessly not negative because I'm not the sort of person who needs things to be positive or hopeful. But like I recently watched Pan's Labyrinth, and weirdly that made me think of, obviously it's an old movie, but I watched it as a kid, which was a terrible idea. So I watched it as an adult with adult eyes, and I found it a lot less scary as an adult, at least for the reasons that you're supposed to find it scary as an adult. And something I really liked about Pan's Labyrinth, which made me think of the game, was that Pan's Labyrinth is so dark. It is so dim, but like it is also quite stubbornly hopeful. There's kind of always
Mm.
something, even if it's like, okay, well, everything has crumbled, but maybe there's still this baby that we could take care of at the end, I don't know. So I was kind of hoping for something like that throughout the entire game. I didn't necessarily need a happy ending or some like,
Yeah.
glimmer of hope or something, but I think I just would
Mm.
have liked something to cut through the cynicism because it all just felt a little bit too dense and heavy for me. And not even heavy like I can't handle heavy sort of emotions. It just, like I said, it felt a bit unearned. It felt a bit just like, oh, wow. It felt nihilistic. Nihilistic in a way
I
that
think
I
I think
didn't like.
Daisuke's supposed to be kind of
Yeah, then he
lighter part of the
dies.
game, and then he dies. Yeah,
Then he dies. That's the thing. I was like, I loved when Daisuke was there, and it's like, if anything, I maybe would have liked Daisuke to survive, or at least Anya to survive, or something like that. But obviously, there was no way for that to happen. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that. What it reminds me of in a kind of nerdy way is the television show Torchwood, which is a spin-off
I
of
was
the
thinking that the
television
whole
show.
time, yeah.
I
This is
thought you
just
were,
like
yeah.
Captain Jack and,
Which is a
I don't
spin-off
know
of
the other
Doctor Who
captain.
for those who are uninitiated.
Gross. Nerd
Um,
alert. Wee
which
woo,
I
wee
watched when
woo.
I was quite young, and it's also just like because it's like the adult show that's like paired to Doctor Who. I feel like it goes to like a slightly almost embarrassing length sometimes to show how like dark and serious it is, in a way which made it like not at least until season 3, which is very good. The first couple of seasons have made it like relentlessly dark and grinding and super moody
Gritty.
in a way which is not very appealing. Whereas, Doctor Who has episodes which I actually do think are well done and like scary episodes and stuff. And that's partially because there's a contrast. Like there's up moments, there's down moments. Whereas this game and the TV show Torchwood are so relentlessly dark that it's like I'm not even that engaged with it on like an emotional level because there's like, what am I supposed to get attached to? Like, as soon as you start playing that game, this was my perspective. I see Jimmy. He was seemed like a bit of a prick. I was like, okay, well, given the vibe of the game, he's going to be awful, And then as the game goes on, when they reveal all the terrible things Jimmy does and make you do them, you're like, yeah, this feels expected. This feels like the kind of thing that this game's going to get you to do. So yeah, but I also feel like my appreciation overall for the game has increased through this conversation. So thank you very much,
Thank you.
comrades.
Yeah, comrades.
All right. Well, I think we've covered mouthwashing. We've guzzled it down. We swirled it around our mouth, spat it out into you, the listeners' faces.
But make sure you
Metaphorically.
floss.
Yeah, don't actually take actual
Don't actually
mouthwash,
use mouthwash.
but just appreciate
floss and
the
brush your teeth.
beautiful metaphor I crafted for you, the listener. And now we're on to the news. We've got some good chunks of news here. And first up, it's going to be me. Yeah, you're going to hear more of me talking. Apologies. So what we're talking about this week is a little game that's come out recently called Mindseye, which has had a bit of a rocky launch and a bit of a rocky development. And probably, well, I don't know, is it rocky to have probably very little future? Unfortunately.
That's quite rocky. That's quite rocky.
Rocky to have no future? Okay. So the story of Mindseye starts a number of years ago when Leslie Benzies, who he left Rockstar. Now, he was the producer of basically all the big Grand Theft Auto games, starting with 3, the first properly 3D one. And so obviously was quite involved, to at least to some degree. The exact level of involvement is a matter of dispute, it seems. But in some of the biggest games ever made. However, in 2018, things got a bit spicy and he got chucked. It seems that he claims that he was encouraged to go on sabbatical. And then while he was on sabbatical, all of his passwords were changed. And apparently he had some family members who also worked at Rockstar. They all got fired. Apparently, that's what he claims. So he took Take-Two and Rockstar, Take-Two, the company that owns Rockstar, to court and had some not great time of it. He quite famously, it came out through the kind of the discovery of the lawsuit, an email in which Sam Houser, who is kind of known as the main creative lead of the Grand Theft Auto games, they apparently were having trouble with Red Dead Redemption, I believe the first Red Dead Redemption, and he sent Leslie Benzies an email trying to get him more involved, and he famously said, "We need the Ben." So
Need the Ben.
this kind of became a famous quote, but it seemed
For some reason, he didn't mean Tony Benn.
So
The person we
unfortunately
really all
not.
need right now.
Man, just imagine if Tony Benn had influence over the GTA game. What a better world that would be.
Yeah.
Sadly not. But it seems that he didn't need the Benz anymore because they got fired. Benzies took Rockstar to court. Didn't do terribly well. 12 out of his 18 claims were dismissed, and the remaining ones were settled out of court secretly, though it seems like he probably got a decent amount of money. I mean, to be fair, he was pretty involved in making games that made unbelievably huge amounts of money. He worked on GTA 5, the last game he worked on. So after that, he had a bit of cash to burn. So he's decided to start his own company. It went through a bit of some ups and downs, but eventually ended with this company called Build a Rockets Boy, which is a weird name. But about a year or so ago, they finally revealed the game they've been working on, which is called Mindseye. So this game, if you go watch the trailers, is painfully, painfully generic. It really looks like a game, not really kind of technically, but just in content from about 10 years ago. And this game has now come out. It kind of seems like it is a game from about 10 years ago. It has had terrible reviews. It just seems to be completely uninspired and also just filled with a litany of technical problems. It really is kind of a disaster. It seems that Sony has actually been giving people refunds, which you can always do on Steam, but to get Sony to do it is very difficult. They did it for the original release of Cyberpunk on the PlayStation 4, and that was under massive suffering. So this really does suggest how bad the situation was for this game. I believe they were at some very low amount on concurrence on Steam. It seems that this game has really been a flop. So that in itself is bad and noteworthy. But part of the things that happened with it is that he somewhat bizarrely, so Mark Gerhard, who is the co-CEO of Build a Rocket Boy, and I should say Build a Rocket Boy is it's a UK studio. They are also in Edinburgh, just like Rockstar North. So our our sympathies go out to them. But he posted on the official Mindseye Discord that he claimed that because even before the game came out, there was a lot of criticism floating around about it, and he said that that there had been a concerted effort to trash the game and studio by someone. Apparently, someone asked him in an AMA or QA session, "Do you think that all the people who reacted negatively were financed by someone?" And he replied, 100%. Doesn't take
Wow.
much to guess who. A crying smiley face, which is always the sign of a true discourse king. Someone said
Our checks are in the mail.
there were some shocked responses to this in the Discord, and someone said a co-CEO for a studio implying another studio is paying previewers to talk negatively about your game is an absolutely wild comment to make in a public environment in any situation. And he replied, "Not wild when it's true."
Oh my God. On me?
Then apparently one of the people who were criticizing him on the Discord was someone who calls himself Cyberboy. And he said, "Folks, I never said Cyberboy was being paid by anyone. I just said there is a concerted effort by some people that don't want to see Leslie or build a rocket boy to be successful, but are making a concerted effort to trash the game in studio. It's pretty easy to see the bots and the repeated replies to any content we put out." So another user asked to clarify. So just to clarify, you believe that individuals, be it content creators or otherwise, have been paid off to criticize Mindseye? And Gerhard then kind of apparently got a bit spooked out and said, "No, I never said that." I mean, that is literally what he just said. He said, "I do know that there are bot farms posting negative comments and dislikes. This seems quite spurious, especially considering that the game came out and has been widely trashed by practically everyone. Obviously, I don't think we're going to get any legal trouble. It seems that the implication from what he's saying is that he thinks that Rockstar were doing this as part of their campaign against them. This just seems to be like a bizarre kind of hubris that swims around the top of this game. Didn't work out for everyone because the game Mindseye was actually published by IOI, who make the Hitman games. IO Interactive, that's what the second I stands for. CEO Hakan Abrak said in regards to this issue, "I don't know. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I just think the game should speak for itself on June the 10th." So kind of seems like he didn't get much backup for his claims.
So let's entertain this for a second, though. So where did all the negative feeling for the game come from, given that this was before the game came out and no review copies were given for the game? Like, it was very panned
Yeah.
before
Well,
anyone had even
people are
before even reviewers had
there
played it, and it wasn't like negative hype.
something I did miss, and thanks for catching it, is that they also sent no review code out to anyone. No one had the game to play for review until the day it came out. So there were trailers and stuff that frankly didn't look great. I believe there was some
Yeah.
preview some preview stuff that was sent out, and not the full game, but just preview stuff which got a bad reception to it. And I mean, I kind of feel like those who were panning it are now vindicated. So I find it hard to imagine, you know, I mean, I imagine that there is quite a lot of bad blood between Leslie Benzies and the guys at Rockstar, but it seem pretty unrealistic that they'd waste their time doing this, since it never looked like that great a thing anyway. Something I should mention is that Builder Rocket Boy working on another project, which apparently is still ongoing and is sort of, I believe, featured in Mindseye. I'll get into it in a sec. They were trying to make a kind of a game platform, perhaps, called Everywhere. And the idea for this was it was basically going to be Roblox, but for grown-ups, essentially. So you were going to be able to make your own games and your own content with some sort of tools to some degree. Exactly how that would have worked is unclear. It still isn't out. In Mind's Eye, there is the ability, apparently only on PC, to make your own mission. So clearly a similar thing, but apparently it's not directly connected to Everywhere. And from my understanding, the way the game works is it's a pretty linear story. It's apparently only like 6 hours long. It's not even a very long story, but it's set in an open world. But there's nothing to do in the open as part of the story. It's basically just a backdrop for that story. But the things there are missions and stuff to do, but they are all missions that have been made using this kind of a system, partly by the developers, but also by normal people. So all the kind of side content is quite, you know, basic and not very well done, from my understanding. So this game has just been kind of a bizarre mess, and the outcome. Sorry.
Sort of sounds like it was just a tech demo for this other thing that
Mm.
they've decided that they can make money from releasing, and it was kind of backfired
Yeah.
by ruining any potential goodwill that anyone could have had.
It also seems like he just made an open world game because that's what the GTA games are, even though
That's what
he
GTA
didn't
did.
actually have a proper game for an open world. Yeah, it just seems that some bizarre decisions. Unfortunately, this led, as you might imagine, to the game selling quite badly, it seems, and apparently had a concurrent player count of 3,302 on Steam at launch, but had a 24-hour peak of just 130 players.
Wow.
It's for a game that, cost many millions to
Mm.
produce, an open world, all these apparently the cinematics and stuff are quite good, even if they're quite generic. They're like well made, they're
Mm.
well animated, apart from all the bizarre errors in it. I mean, you go watch a Digital Foundry have done some videos on this game. Some of them are like genuinely terrible, and it runs like absolutely terribly, even on like a
Mm.
PlayStation Pro, like the most powerful console. Like super high end PCs can't run it properly. It's terrible. Anyway, the seemingly inevitable has happened in this industry these days anyway, and have been some pretty big layoffs, it seems. Seems that 100 people have been laid off, and they currently have 300 employees, so that's a third of the entire worker base. Although it's, they have to go through various kind of 45-day consultancies and other kind of limits on exactly how they're able to structure them, but it does appear to be that many. They do have another 200 employees abroad. But there is a statement from the studio which is, "We can confirm that we have had to make the painful decision to notify our hardworking team of some internal changes at Builder Rocket Boy. While we are working to reassign roles for as many of those impacted by these changes as possible, sadly, we are initiating a formal consultation process that may result in redundancy. This decision has not been made lightly, and we are committed to handling this process with transparency, fairness, and respect for all employees. We will provide further details to the team over the coming week." The launch of Mindseye has been a significant milestone for Builder Rocket Boy, but we all know that we have a lot more to do to grow our community in the coming years. The challenges we faced have only strengthened our resolve, and while we are deeply saddened by today's decision and thankful for our incredible team, this shift allows us to focus on delivering ongoing updates and performance optimization for Mindseye, while also ensuring the long-term success of Builder Rocket Boy's future ambitions. So, yeah, pretty shit situation. It kind of seems like this guy from Rockstar high somewhat on his own supply, even if maybe he had a supply to be high from in the first place. Kind of just thought he could kind of somewhat throw things together and has in the end kind of put a bunch of people out of a job, unfortunately.
Shit.
As always, what is the solution to this? It is to unionize. If that entire studio was unionized, he'd have a lot more trouble doing this stuff. And if the entire industry was unionized, he'd have a great deal of trouble indeed. The same recommendation as always. It's a bit of a boring thing to say, but it's always true. All right. Well, then I think we'll be going on to our other news item, which we're getting from Ed.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, mine's not so much a news item as it's just a thing I wanted to raise. So I've heard a bit about recently about this consumer campaign called Stop Killing Games, and I wanted to get your guys' take on it. So it's not, I say it's not news because it's been around for quite a while. It's just I feel like, for reasons I'll make clear, is there's been a bit of buzz about it recently. So this campaign argues that an increasing number of games are designed to be completely unplayable once support from the developer ends. And so, in effect, this is an illegal form of planned obsolescence. And they say this is bad for both consumers who want to keep playing the game, and it's also bad for game preservation because that game's just gone once developers stop supporting it. So the campaign at the moment is centered on this petition to the EU, which ends next month. So I think that's why there's a bit of talk about it right now, because they want to try and get it over the line. They need, I believe, 1 million signatures to have it be discussed or whatever the next step is at the EU level. And they're currently at slightly over 500,000 signatures. So they're not there yet, but 500,000 signatures is quite a lot of signatures. I know that they've previously worked with a couple of MEPs and submitted questions at the EU about the legality of planned obsolescence in games like this. And the result of that was they seem to have identified that games that do this may be violating EU Directive 93/13/EEC, but that they said that it was up to member states to investigate that rather than the EU. So, yeah, naturally they opened petitions in multiple member states like France and Germany, and there's also a petition on the government website in the UK, which, well, when I checked, had over 27,000 signatures to look into this and to sort of put in more clear and compelling legislation to try and force developers to force their hands on this. So I had a few thoughts on this before I ask what you guys think. My first thought is I don't really play a lot of games that are super new. The only game that I've played as part of this podcast that's been recent was Split Fiction. That's the only one from 2025 I've played.
Mouthwashing only came out end of last year.
Mouthwashing, that's true. But so I don't really know many games that this applies to, and they didn't seem to have a list on their website of what games they were specifically talking about. So I don't know if I'll open this to you. Can you think of games that this might apply to? I'm definitely not saying there aren't any. I believe that there are. But
Yeah. I guess like
for the sake of
Helldivers,
our
like
audience.
live server games, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of instances where games are like taken off the storefronts where because they lose licenses or or like quite often like live service games they don't want to run the servers anymore.
For sure. But can you give any
Well, I mean,
examples?
recently there
Because
was
I can't.
this is probably not quite the same because I think they did refund everyone, but Concord, the famous disaster from Sony recently, they started it. It was a game that you bought for $60 or whatever. At least I'm not entirely sure what it was here. Maybe it might have been a bit cheaper than that, but it was money you paid, and then after like a month, the game was shut down.
Yeah.
What did you pay for? This is less for your single player games. It's a story that you start and you finish, but games that are ongoing. And there are a lot of games now because there are so many games now that even if they are ostensibly single player, they have some sort of connection to the internet. For instance, like I don't know, this isn't an example because this can still work very fine without the internet. But like say Dark Souls, right? That's a single player game, but people leave their messages, and Elden Ring as well, things like that. That's a single player game that does have internet connectivity, but there are a lot of them that have that kind of connectivity and just won't play. And it could the developers, on one level, you're like, well, if they don't want to pay for the servers to run it anymore, that's their prerogative. But what they could do is they could put out a patch that basically makes the game not need that connection anymore. So at least you could play
Yeah.
existing version of it.
So my first thought about this was I can't really think of that many games, but I'm fully aware that there are loads, and I'm just not playing them. So this was not at all a criticism of the campaign. It's just these aren't the kind of games that I play, but I was still wanting to bring the story up because it's interesting. But my second thought was, but it sounds like they're saying they want games to be supported forever, which does sound unrealistic to me, even though it would be nice.
Yeah.
But that's obviously a very common criticism, and it's one that they've addressed. The exact quote from them is, "What we are asking for is that they implement an end-of-life plan to modify or patch the game so that it can run on customer systems with no further support from the company being necessary." And they also give multiple examples of games which have done that. Games that originally did require active server support from a big developer, but no longer does. And some of the examples they give are Gran Turismo Sport, Scrolls/Calder's Bane by Mojang, Mega Man X Dive by Capcom, Knockout City by VLAN Studios, and a game called Duelist, which I don't know, but published by Bandai Namco. So there are. It doesn't seem like it's, despite my initial thought, it doesn't seem like it's actually asking for something completely unrealistic. To patch a game into a state where it doesn't need constant support does seem quite plausible.
Yeah. I mean, there's like there's a lot of games where, I mean, I would say a bigger problem, or a problem that more people are enthused about anyway, is games just being removed from sale and you can't get them anymore, and people are worried about that for preservation reasons. For instance, you can't get any of the the Forza Motorsport or Horizon, for that matter, games before a certain point. Like, you can't, Forza Horizon 4, I think, you can't get it. If you have it installed on your Xbox or on your PC, you can play it, but there's no way to get it anymore. And that's because of the licensing of all the cars in it, right? They don't want to pay for the licensing, so they don't want to do that. Now, presumably, it would be possible to have some sort of deal with the car manufacturers that says, like, look, here's what, here's what it is for it to have it forever. I mean, you can't edit a car out of a movie, right? And cars appear in those. James Bond drives an Aston Martin. If at minimum, if it wasn't product placement, which it may well have been, there's plenty of those in the Bond films, but they at least will have got the clearance from Aston Martin for that, right? If James Bond or whoever owns James Bond at Amazon or whoever doesn't, like, has a disagreement with Aston Martin in the future and they don't want to work together anymore, well, maybe there won't be Aston Martins in future Bond films, but they can't delete the Aston Martin from the original one.
Yeah.
But that's not the case in a game. Theoretically, you could just delete an entire car from a video game. And that's kind of a worrying situation where this art form has all these elements that are that are changeable and can be changed, patches and stuff. These games are changed, even if they are only in small ways. And kind of the most egregious form of that is when, oh, this game you spent money on, you just can't play it anymore because they haven't bothered to think of some sort of workaround. Even games that require the internet, like just inherently, like a multiplayer game, right? What they should do is make it possible to set up your own servers or something.
Well, that's definitely a part of this campaign. That was one of my thoughts as well.
Yeah, set up your own servers.
I was thinking games that I do play that require constant involvement from the developer from this kind of thing would be like RuneScape. Hello, it's a RuneScape podcast now.
We're back.
But MMOs, we're back. But MMOs seem to be an example of a genre that need that kind of constant intervention. But what I thought of when thinking about that was, well, there was the game Club Penguin back in the day, if you remember it, which got killed relatively recently, a few years back. And I know that there are fans hosting their own versions of Club Penguin, but I think Disney have an ambiguous who own Club Penguin have an ambiguous relationship to it, which means that they can take down those servers whenever they want, and like have never really made clear if they will or they won't. So I think what a better position on that, for example, could be like making it clear that they won't intervene with that kind of stuff means that you can get invested in an MMO, which takes a long time and you put a lot of work into it without thinking that it's just going to get like cut down again at any second due to a cease and desist or something.
Yeah.
So I think that's the kind of thing that would probably be in the sort of stop killing games campaigns
Yes,
mold.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
What do you reckon? You look very pensive there, Sophie. What what do you
Yeah,
think
I
about
mean, like,
this?
I also don't really play games that much that have this problem, I think. I don't really play a lot of live server games. I do obviously think if a customer pays for something, they're entitled to have that thing, you know, forever. I do think that. It's not really a similar example, but I will never forgive Destiny, the franchise, because I bought Destiny 2, like, brand new when it came out, and I spent like
Mm.
1,000 rand on it at the time. I don't really remember what that would have been in pounds, but it was very expensive in South African rands. And I bought it to play with my brother. And then, like, a year or so later, they made it free. And then they gutted the game of all the sort of actual story content that existed in the vanilla game. And instead now, like, all of the playable content is all the, like, plot content, all the storyline content is just DLCs. So if I launch into the game, there's, like, nothing for me to do because I don't have any of the DLCs, but I did pay for the base game. And I'm
yeah.
still really upset to
They
this
didn't.
day because they didn't
They
give me any kind
they
of,
didn't
like,
give
legacy
you.
access or anything. They didn't give me
That's bad.
any kind of legacy access, but I paid the full price for the game.
Well,
And
I think what happened with that one is that they like removed a bunch of
yeah,
the original
yeah,
you
they
like
did
it's not just
because of the
you have to
way.
pay for it. You just can't play it.
Exactly.
No,
Yeah,
they don't
exactly.
sell
It
it.
just
They don't
doesn't
do it.
exist anymore because
Yeah.
basically, like, the plot progressed in DLC to the point where the original plot was kind of now obsolete or irrelevant or something like that. So essentially they removed that original content from the
Yeah,
game.
yeah.
So now the only sort of playable plot lines are in the DLC. So it's not quite the same thing, but, like, I was just shocked that, like, I didn't get any sort of
Mhm.
privileges for having bought the game, and I really do think I was entitled to at least, like a year pass or a season pass or something like that would have given me access to the content that was gutted from the game. It was
Or
very
like
expensive.
access
terrible.
to an equivalent amount of content in DLC as
Exactly.
you lost.
Exactly.
Yeah, that seems bad.
Yeah, and
But I mean,
it
That seems
was
bad.
bad. Yeah.
but even if they had done that, right, which
Yeah.
they should have done, but even if they'd done that, you still like when you
Still wouldn't
bought the
have happened.
game, you were
Yeah.
maybe you like I don't know looked at the pictures on the back and you're like, wow, that area looks really
Yeah.
cool. I
Mm.
can't wait to play that. And like that's
Yeah.
not in the game anymore. It's
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
So
So
Yeah, if you buy a film, they don't come to your house and replace the
yeah.
DVD that you've got with a new with the special edition that you don't like as much.
I mean,
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
closest
Sorry
is
to bring Star Wars into
George
this.
Lucas messing with the Star Wars films, right?
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah,
those
exactly.
those reels of Star Wars, the original Star Wars films, they still exist, right? You didn't go back and
Mm.
re-edit them. You can.
Yeah.
It is still
So
theoretically old VHS copies of Star Wars: A New Hope from the
yeah.
1980s. They
So
still
yeah, not
exist.
quite the same thing, obviously, with Destiny. It's not obviously not quite the same thing, but it was really upsetting at the time. And I will never forgive it. Like, I have had my brother who's tried to convince me to play Destiny since, because he still plays it. And he's like, just get a DLC. I
Yeah.
was like, no, I'm never going to give them more money ever again in my life because they stole, genuinely,
I
I feel
think
like
that's
they
completely fair.
stole 1,000 rand from me
I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
because
completely valid.
I now own
I
an
think
empty
the
game.
main difference for me
you
with
know?
special editions, which are that it would be like if George came to your house and stole your DVD of Star Wars and then said, "Oh, don't worry, you can have this other one that you don't want instead." Not that I've got a big problem with the special editions. Let's not get into that whole
Yeah.
debate. But more anyway. Sorry. Hi guys.
Wee woo wee woo, nerd alert.
I like George. George
More
makes good
controversial
stuff.
nerd.
Right.
Nerd
Wee woo
opinion.
wee woo.
Yeah, come on, George.
Come on the podcast. No, it's fine.
Yeah, my only other stuff that I have to say on this campaign, there was a video that was going around about it where someone was pushing back saying, well, this would be really difficult for indie devs to accommodate. But I personally didn't find that to be a very strong argument against this. Well, how many
don't make the game then.
indie games can we
Personally, I
think
think.
of that are these sort of live service games? Like that's not
Yeah.
really characteristic of
Yeah.
an indie developer, I
Yeah.
would say.
I feel like that's the same argument as, like, well, if you're not good at writing, ChatGPT makes it easier for you
Maybe
to
don't-
write. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, then learn to write.
Yeah.
Or don't
If I
write.
didn't underpay my staff, then I wouldn't
You
make enough
know?
money.
I think I mean, again, it's not that I mean, it's not a zero cost, right? But just to put out a patch that essentially just removes the online elements and makes what is remaining in the game doable and And I guess maybe like a legal requirement that you won't sue
Yeah.
someone who hacks the game to add new servers. I think that's probably what
It's
it would
hard to
be.
argue with that,
And
isn't
I
it?
find that difficult to. I mean, yes, of course, you are going to have instances where, I don't know, an indie developer, like a developer just goes under or something, right? And there's no one there. I mean, genuinely, let's imagine an indie game
Yeah.
made by one person and then that person
Well,
dies.
how would
Well,
exactly though?
what are you
What would
gonna
you do? Like, that's not a reason to not have the law. Because you couldn't if there's no one to enforce the law, then no one's suffering from the fact that you would say that this law was bad. It literally doesn't. It's not really relevant.
While I mean, I do think that developers should at least be heavily incentivized to like patch their game at the end of it to make it work. I think the most important thing is just to legally protect those who then hack the game
Yeah.
and keep it working for the fans. This is kind of reminiscent of a thing that happened in America where there's an organization called the
Mhm.
Video Game History Foundation, and they do what you imagine. They preserve the history of video games, and one of the things they tried to do, like what they have a long term kind of ambitious goal of basically having a gigantic archive of like every game ever made, and also that it be you're able to play them relatively easily. Maybe you have to like register with them or something first, but it should be possible relatively easy for researchers to go back and play the entire history of gaming. And the game publishers have worked like tooth and nail against it because they think it's like a bit like piracy or something. And the foundation attempted to get an amendment in the
I
law,
don't think it
I
would be
guess
in
in
the
the
Constitution,
Constitution.
would
I'm
it?
not entirely sure. It wasn't quite as
That would be
no, maybe not the
optimistic.
Constitution, but what's the
Yeah.
DMCA you hear about, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Yeah. They wanted an amendment made to that to basically mean that games who they have now lost the owners. So there's no one who's coming to claim this. Is like, oh, the company went out of business or something. So they're like orphan pieces of art, essentially, that they would have the right to present those, right? So not games that any publisher that exists owns, right? Not Nintendo, not Sony, not Microsoft, no one. And basically, the industry lobbied heavily against it, and even this like unbelievably reasonable thing to ask, they blocked it.
I wanted to say the other pushback that this campaign has had ties into the US actually, and sort of weird US law, because there's the dispute that some have made, which is that you don't buy a game, you rather you are licensed access to a game. That's the sort of legally
Yeah.
shift. That
I
is the
believe that
legal.
is the legal case, and that has always been.
Well, that's
Even
very
even
much
when you own the
disputed.
game on a cartridge.
That is definitely the legal case in the United States of America, and it differs from country to country. Hence, the target of an EU-wide ruling on it, because for most places it's sort of ambiguous. Like, who works it out? Well, you only work that out if game companies are trying to prevent you from doing various things, or coming up with various legal reasons for you to stop stuff like this happening, or the game preservation stuff. So the point of this is to put in this thing beforehand, confirming that you are buying a good when you buy a game. You're not buying licensed access to a game.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why this is focused on the EU rather than the United States, because it's not a settled law in the EU at all. It differs from country to country, whereas the US, alas, the corporate overlords of that nation have already seized games from our clutches.
Yeah, one of these days we're gonna have like a deep dive into game preservation, because it is an interesting and very fraught topic, and I do think there's a lack of I don't know, the kind of political angle that we can bring to it in that discussion. But that's probably a bit too in depth for today, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the Stop Killing Games campaign. I don't think it's likely to stop killing games, but I don't see it. Like, it sounds like a good idea. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't sign that petition. It sounds good
like
to
a
me.
good idea.
www.stopkillinggames.com if you're interested in finding out more. Have a look if that sounds of interest to you. But it's kind of that's sort of my final thoughts on the campaign. But sure, okay, sounds interesting. Oh well.
Thank you for the story.
Yes, I think we're gonna say. Are we gonna say that we as the Red Barrels podcast endorse this campaign?
Yeah.
Yes.
Why not? Yeah. I think it makes sense.
That's consensus, baby. We did it. We did it. No one can deny this isn't a democratic podcast.
If you're going to make me participate in capitalism, I think that when I buy a product,
Yeah,
I
where
should
does
be
this
able to have
licensing
it
rather than owning a good thing
forever.
end? Like, can you say that with everything? Like, if they just decide
Mm,
that when I buy a book, I've licensed the book? Yeah, I've
exactly.
licensed my
You've
bed sheets.
licensed your bed sheets.
I'm fairly
Yeah.
sure. I fairly when I eat some bread, I've licensed the bread.
Give it back.
Oh, sorry, we've discontinued
own it
the
temporarily.
bread. So please throw it up.
Yeah.
Give it back.
We're only years away from that
Yeah.
being true.
All we want is bread, roses, and continued
well,
access to our video games.
That's all we want. It's not a long list.
That's a less catchy song, unfortunately. I think that's probably going to be it for this episode of the Red Barrels podcast. As always, I've been Alex Dean, and you can find me on the internet all over the place, but more specifically on Twitter or X as @AlexDean, ALEXDUIN. You can find me on Blue Sky at AlexDean, spelled the same way, .bsky.social. Sophie, where can people find you?
Yeah, I stream on Twitch 4 days a week, twitch.tv/SoFreely, SOFREELY.
And Ed, what about you?
Hello.
Let's hear
You can
the
find
deets.
me on
Bring them out.
Blue Sky at Not a Lemon, and you can find me on X at Still Not a Lemon if you are so inclined. And of course, I'm sure you'll be able to find me on the next episode of the Red Barrels podcast. So I really do hope you subscribe to this because we've got such good stuff planned.
Yeah.
Probably really juicy content lined up you won't want to miss.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? You can probably also
probably
find
really
me or
do,
perhaps
yeah.
Gonna
Alex
be
or
really
perhaps Sophie, who knows, at Games Transformed in London at Pelican House on July the 12th.
Games Transformed.
That really feels like you confirmed you'd be there, and the other two are maybes. But that's true. I will remind you of that address. You can get it out. You can get it at tickettailor.com/events/games transformed. That's where you get the tickets. And
Link in the description, baby.
I think yes, the link is in the description. And I think this is actually going to be the last episode before that. So, suffice to say, I assume when you're listening to this, that maybe you're listening to this at the festival. You're there, you're drowning out whatever Chris Bratt is talking about, and you're listening to us. And,
Boring.
maybe that's the most pure way to enjoy it. Perhaps it is. Perhaps it is. You've heard the music and you love the music. It's by Brilliant Drink. And as always, you are a coward if you do not share us on the internet and review us on Spotify and iTunes. I don't know how much clearly I can say that. So,
Boo.
I think we're actually
Cowards.
done. And so that means we're going to have to say,
No,
Ed,
I'm not
you
going
seem
to say
like you're going to
something.
say something?
I'm just excited to say goodbye to our audience. Ready?
I was
Okay.
excited.
I know you guys love it. I think maybe our
Alrighty.
audience loves it a bit less, but I don't want to harsh
they
your
love it.
vibe.
They love it. They've told me they love it.
I'm going to say goodbye.
Bye.